Hello, I wanted to record a video and share a testimony that I had of something that I experienced when I was a teenager, um, when I had an experience meeting Jesus. It was in a dream, but it was one of those dreams that you know that it was more than a dream. When I was 16 years old, I was diagnosed with a really deadly cancer, and no one gave me any promises that I would live, but they were putting me through some really hard chemotherapy. If you've seen my other testimony, I kind of explain that. But that was in the year 1990. I had just turned 16 years old. So the good thing is that the Lord gave me a lot of peace while I went through it. It was still scary. The treatments were still hard. But the Lord helped me through it. And one day, while I was there in the middle of all that, I lived with my grandparents. I had the best grandparents that anyone could ever ask for, because thanks to them, God used them to literally save my life. Norma and Frank Henry. Now, they've both gone on to be with the Lord now, but during that time, they had taken me in, their grandson, a teenager, and they were the ones that were supporting me while I went through all these treatments and the cancer. And my grandmother, she was just the best. She would mop up every time I would throw up, which was a lot of times after the treatments, during and after the treatments. But anyway, while I was there, it was during that first year that I started the treatments, which was in April. So I think it was probably later that year, maybe in August, but I had heard someone on the radio or in like a church service. At this time, I was only listening to Christian radio, and which is pretty much what I listen to now. But someone told me that if you asked Jesus, like to show himself to you, if you asked him enough, he would do it. So I got this idea in my head, and I said, I'm going to start praying, because I really want to see Jesus. I was really close to the Lord during this time in my life. I was reading the Bible a lot. I still am. And it's the best life. I would never want to do anything else. But I remember just every night before I would go to bed, I would pray, and then just at the end of that prayer or in the middle, I would just say, Jesus, I want to see you. I want to see you, Jesus. I've heard that you'll reveal yourself to someone if they asked you, and I want to see you. Well, of course, the first week nothing happened, but I just kept on. So I just kept asking, and it was about, what I remember was around a month of asking, maybe a month and a week. It was like around 1 month that I was just asking. Every now and then I would forget, but then I would just remember again, and then I would just keep asking, Lord, please let me see you. Well, one night, as I went to sleep in my bedroom, and all of a sudden I remember this dream, and I was in my auditorium, the gymnasium of my high school. I remember that the bleachers were all pushed back in, to the wall, and I was on the side of it, near one end, and all of a sudden these two tall men, one on each arm, grabbed one arm and the other one grabbed another arm. They were wearing white, and I immediately knew they were angels. And they just started walking. So it was like, here I am in this gymnasium. I look around, and the next thing I know, these two angels have my arm, and we're walking. And we're walking to the other end of the gymnasium where there was a door. And they didn't have wings. I didn't really look a lot at them, but I asked them, where are we going? And they said, we're taking you to see Jesus. And it was very clear. I still remember every detail, even today, decades later. So we walked to the end of the gymnasium, walked into the room, and in the room there were it had carpet, like a small type of carpet. It wasn't a shag or nothing, but it like something you might see in a kindergarten class. And there were all these desks, like children's desks, like school desks, and each one had chairs behind it. So I don't remember if they walked me to it, but all I remember now is that I'm behind this desk where the door is, in front of the door, but about 3 rows back, and maybe one column to the side. And all of these desks all had other children, like teenagers, I should say, like me. They were like all my age, 15, 16. And so there I was, and I saw all these other people sitting down. I was sitting down at this desk. Then all of a sudden, just a couple of moments after that, the door opened, and Jesus walked in the room. And I remember he had to duck his head to come into the door. He was tall, and he had a white robe. I could see his face clearly. It wasn't like, some people say they couldn't see him or anything like that. It wasn't like that. He was muscular. Like, I could tell his build was kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, even though it wasn't showing, I can just tell he was very strong. And he had this golden brown curly hair that was very like beautiful tight curls that went to his shoulder about this length. And one thing I noticed, whenever he would turn, because he looked at the room, when he would turn and he turned back straight, his hair would be perfectly straight again, like in position again, like it wouldn't get messed up. And later on, I've heard other testimonies, on YouTube, and they describe him just like I saw. So he had this golden brown hair. Now, maybe he appears different to different people. I don't know. This is just what I saw. So anyway, he looks back at me, and the feeling that I had was like, wow, this is the maker of the whole universe, and he came here to see me. there is just, you feel this, you get this awareness that you just feel like, wow, that you didn't realize before until he's right there in your presence. And I remember literally thinking in my dream, wow, this is the king, the creator of the whole universe, the maker of all the stars, of everything, and he is here right now, and he's looking at me. And so when he looked at me, he didn't look at me with like this great love or like big smile or nothing. He actually kind of had a serious look at me, it was almost like he was seeing my entire future and seeing what I was going through, what I was gonna go through, and now I kind of have more insight that because of the setting, it was kind of like symbolic. Like I was just a new Christian. I had a lot to learn, and I think that's what the classroom made or was about. Well, anyway. So then the next thing I knew, he lifted up his head like this, and he started speaking in tongues, in a language. It was a language. I could tell it was a real language, but I couldn't understand what it was. He was talking, but I knew he was talking directly to the Father. And so he did that, in a loud voice, and then he looked back at me. Then the other children that were in the desks, they all did the same thing. They looked up to heaven, and then they started speaking in tongues. And I didn't know anything about tongues. I wasn't really brought up about tongues. I mean, I was, later on, I kind of got into charismatic things, but not at this point. And so then he did it again. He looked up and spoke in tongues, and then he looked back down at me. And then the other children, they looked up, spoke in tongues, and they looked back forward, like pointing to... Jesus was at the front of the class, next to the door, where he just stepped in. So then that happened 2 or 3 times. I think it was 3 times, but I'm not sure. But I know it was at least 2 times. And the feeling that I got was, I remember feeling kind of left out, like, wow, I don't know how to do that. Everyone else is doing that. Jesus is doing that. There's something that I'm lacking, or that I need to know, but I don't know. So I don't, I remember feeling a little bit, awkward, but I just stayed quiet. Then everything changed. The whole scene changed. And then Jesus took me through a series of mental images and feelings of what he went through when he was on the cross. So the very next thing was, Jesus showed me, it was like I was in his brain when he was hanging on the cross, like what it felt like. The main thing I remember was that he, even as a human, being God, even as a human, he was very surprised at when they lifted up the cross, how it didn't bend. It just held his whole body. I remember that going through my brain, like if it was me, but it was him. I knew that it was him telling me, basically, this is what I felt. This is what some things that surprised me. I think you understand what I'm trying to say. It was like he was just so, like, wow, this wood it doesn't bend. It holds me. That was one thing. And then, of course, that was just the beginning, because then eventually he died on the cross. But anyway, Then he showed me, I saw his arms, like his arm, from his shoulder down to his wrist, and it looked built, also built like a like like a weightlifter, like an Arnold Schwarzenegger. And what I saw, and maybe this is symbolic, I don't know, but I saw two veins, if I can kind of, like two veins running all the way down, like parallel to each other, and they were popping out, like very high, popping out. So I could imagine his blood pressure was extremely high. I don't know, but I saw these two veins going down his arm, but one was red, like you could see that it was red under his skin, and one was blue. I remember that when I saw the veins in his arms, the red and blue veins, he told me in my mind that this happened because of how much I loved you, like humanity, because of how much love he has for humanity. So I didn't understand it all at that time, but that's just one thing that I do remember clearly about his arms and the veins that were popping out. Then after that, he showed me his wrist. I just seen his wrist in front of me, and it had a hole that it wasn't in his hand where they nailed him. They nailed him in his wrist, and it had a hole. It was stretched. It had been elongated where the hole was about like that much, like an inch. It was pretty big hole. I mean, you could see straight through it. Kind of like if you've seen the movie The Passion at the end, when Jesus stands up. It was kind of like that, but it was in his wrist. And so he showed me the nails in his wrist. Then it changed, and then the only way that I can describe this part was he let me feel the power of his love. So it was like I was this small little entity, and he had this little line or dot of his pure love. And me being this little entity, I was wrapped around it. What he was really trying to show me is that was like my life. And one thing I noticed right away, there was so much energy. It felt kind of like electricity. That if you could have that, if you could hold on to that love and that power of him, you would never have to eat. You would never have to drink water. Your body would literally just continue on forever with that energy that he is. So it's like he is the life. And so that was the last thing that I remember that he did. And so that's pretty much the end of my testimony. And so I just hope that it can encourage someone. And if you've had any similar experiences, feel free to share those. Or if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll do the best that I can. All right. Well, God bless you all. I hope this has been encouraging. All right. Goodbye.